Let's get honest for a second. When was the last time you felt truly in control of your life? Not just busy, not just productive, I mean clear, anchored, aligned. Because if you're like most people, your days probably feel a little foggy, a little scattered. You start things and forget why you started them. You make promises to yourself and break them before noon. You scroll through your phone not because you want to, but because you don't know what else to do. Now hear me on this. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've been living without structure. And in a world that profits off your distraction, choosing discipline is a radical act of self-respect. Discipline isn't just waking up early, eating clean, or checking off to-do lists. Those things help, sure, but they are not the core. Discipline is identity. It's saying, this is who I am, and this is how I show up even when nobody's watching. The Stoic philosophers understood this centuries ago, long before neuroscience ever caught up. People like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they didn't wait to feel motivated. They didn't rely on emotion to guide their decisions. Instead, they built inner laws, a kind of personal constitution that told them what mattered, especially when life got hard. And that, my friend, is where everything changes. Because without discipline, your mind becomes a prisoner of chaos. But when you bring structure into your life, real, intentional inner structure, you reclaim your freedom. Let's break this down. If your mind feels cloudy or restless, it's not a flaw, it's a signal. A signal that you've been living reactively, not intentionally. You've been pulled by everything around you without ever setting your own direction. Think about it. How often do you reach for your phone before your feet hit the floor in the morning? How often do you promise yourself you'll start next week, but you don't? It's not laziness. It's not weakness. It's a lack of personal law. Discipline isn't a life of restriction. It's not about being cold, robotic, or emotionless. That's the lie we've been sold. Real discipline is about intention. It's choosing what strengthens you over what soothes you in the moment. It's showing up not because it's easy, but because it's right. You don't need another hack. You don't need another list of morning habits. You need a shift in how you see yourself, how you think, how you live. Discipline is not a set of tricks. It's a new way of being. Maybe you're an artist. Maybe you're a leader. Maybe you're just trying to hold yourself together through another difficult season. Whoever you are, discipline is not optional. It's the foundation, because without it you drift, quietly, slowly, unnoticeably, until one day you look up and you don't recognize the person you've become. But here's the good news, you can turn it around, and you don't have to wait for some magical day when motivation shows up with a trumpet fanfare. You just have to move, especially when it's hard, especially when it's quiet, especially when no one's watching, because that's what true discipline is. It doesn't shout. It doesn't post for likes. It doesn't need permission or applause. It just shows up, day after day, brick by brick, until one morning you wake up and you realize you didn't just build better habits, you built a new self. So if you're tired of feeling like life is pulling you in every direction, if you're done waiting for motivation to come save you, then maybe it's time. Time to reclaim your structure. Time to become someone you can rely on. Time to remember, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the strength of your systems. And if you want to build a life worth living, it starts not with emotion, but with one quiet, powerful decision: to be disciplined. Because discipline is freedom in disguise. Let me ask you something personal. How do you treat yourself when no one's watching? Not when you're in front of the camera, not when you're on deadline, not when someone's counting on you, but in those quiet, invisible hours when it's just you, your choices, and your future. Because that's where real discipline lies. It doesn't show up on stage. It doesn't need applause. It's in the moment you decide whether to snooze the alarm or sit up, breathe deep, and show up anyway. Discipline isn't about pushing yourself through pain. It's not about restriction, punishment, or trying to become some robotic version of yourself. No. Discipline is self-respect made visible. It's you saying, I matter too much to keep breaking promises to myself. That moment when you're tired, unmotivated, and no one would blame you for taking the easy way out, and yet you choose to rise. That's beautiful because it's not just about that morning or that workout or that task. It's about the message you're sending to yourself. My goals are more important than my mood. And that right there is the foundation of real freedom. Let me give you another example. Imagine you've committed to getting healthy. You're at dinner. Everyone around you is indulging, laughing, urging you to just loosen up a little. And in that moment, you feel the pull to belong, to relax, to give in. But instead, you breathe. You remember why you started. You make a conscious decision, not because you hate pleasure, but because you love your future more than you love the moment. That choice, it might seem small on the outside, but inside it's sacred. It's you reclaiming the author's seat in your own life. Discipline also teaches people how to treat you. When you respect your own time, others begin to respect it too. When you hold boundaries, people feel them. When you keep your word to yourself, you walk differently. You speak with quiet strength. And no, it's not about being perfect. It's about being real. And in a world drowning in noise and performance, authenticity is power. But let's be honest, discipline isn't always pretty. It'll make you face your shadows. It'll show you where you've lied to yourself, like when you said you'd start tomorrow, or that just this one time doesn't count. It will force you to stop romanticizing your potential and start earning it. That's why so many people avoid it, because it's easier to live in the fantasy of someday than in the discomfort of now. The Stoics had it right all along. They didn't act out of emotion, they acted out of intention. They didn't ask, "How do I feel?" They asked, "What's right?" And then they did that again and again and again. Not for glory, not for praise, but because they knew that every disciplined act was a vote for the person they wanted to become. So here's the truth. Real discipline doesn't come from shame. It comes from love, from self-respect, from not wanting to abandon your potential any longer. It's not about control, it's about alignment. And it starts in the smallest, quietest choices. So today, pause and ask yourself, what kind of person are you becoming when no one's watching? Because that person, the one in the silence, when it's hard, when it's quiet, that's who you're building. And that's who the world will one day see. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to copy someone else's routine because you thought that's what successful people do? You saw them waking up at 5 a.m., taking ice baths, journaling, meditating, hitting the gym, reading 50 pages before breakfast, and you said, "Okay, that's the blueprint, I'm doing that." And then 2 weeks in, you're exhausted, you're frustrated, you feel like a failure. Sound familiar? Let me tell you something you need to hear. Discipline is not one size fits all. And just because someone else thrives in a certain rhythm doesn't mean you have to. Think about this. A soldier and a poet, two very different people. The soldier thrives in structure, waking up early, following orders, hitting goals with precision and force. The poet, they might need solitude, flexibility, moments of inspiration that don't fit neatly into a 30-minute calendar block. Both are disciplined, but their discipline looks very, very different. And that's the point. Discipline isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming someone you can rely on consistently. Let's get practical. If you're a night owl trying to force yourself into a 5 a.m. routine might not be a sign of strength. It might be a slow path to burnout. Maybe your creativity comes alive at 10 p.m. Maybe your best ideas hit when the world is quiet and the pressure is off. So why are you judging yourself for not fitting into someone else's mold? Why are you calling yourself lazy when the truth is, you're just wired differently? The Stoics had a concept for this. Live according to nature. And that doesn't just mean nature as in trees and rivers. It means your inner nature, your temperament, your biology, your rhythm. Real discipline isn't about forcing, it's about fitting. Not fitting into a system, but building one that fits you. You know what I've learned? Most people don't fail because they lack willpower. They fail because they're trying to live inside someone else's schedule, someone else's discipline. And eventually, their system collapses because it was never theirs to begin with. Let me give you a personal example. I used to beat myself up for not being a morning person. I'd wake up groggy, angry, dragging myself through a morning routine that looked great on paper but felt like torture. Then one day I stopped copying and started listening. I realized my mind is sharpest at night. I do my best work when the world is asleep. My discipline started working for me, not against me, and guess what? Once I aligned my structure with my nature, I stopped needing motivation. I stopped needing hacks. I just flowed. So ask yourself honestly, when do I feel most focused? What type of environment helps me thrive? Do I need silence, movement, music, nature? And here's the key. Whatever works, protect it. Guard it like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. This isn't about avoiding hard work. It's about stopping the self-sabotage that comes from comparing your path to someone else's. You don't need to adopt extreme routines just because they are trending. You need to build a rhythm that respects who you are and gently pushes you toward who you're becoming. And when you do that, discipline stops feeling like a war. It becomes a rhythm, a flow, a home. So today, stop asking, why can't I stick to this? And start asking, is this even mine? Because when discipline is rooted in self-awareness, not imitation, it becomes something powerful. Not a burden, not a punishment, but a practice. A quiet promise you make to yourself. I will build a life that works for me, that reflects me, that frees me. And from that place, anything is possible. Let me paint a picture. It's not chaos you can see. It's not something loud, dramatic, or urgent. It's quiet. It's that unread message you keep ignoring. That workout you promised yourself you'd start 3 days ago. The pile of stuff you'll get to later. The mental tabs you've left open for weeks. Nothing's on fire, but somehow you feel tired, heavy, disconnected. That is the cost of disorder. And here's the thing most people miss. Disorder rarely screams. It whispers. See, when your life lacks structure, it doesn't fall apart overnight. It fades. Your energy fades. Your clarity fades. Your connection to the person you're trying to become fades, because when your time has no shape, your days have no anchor, and when your days float, so does your purpose. You might think, I'm just in a busy season. But busyness without boundaries isn't purpose. It's noise. And if you don't give your time direction, the world will. The news, social media, other people's priorities, distractions don't ask for permission. They just walk right in if you leave the door open. That's what happens in the absence of order. Let's be real. How often do you start your day reacting instead of leading? You check your phone before you check in with yourself. You answer what's loudest, not what matters most. You go from task to task to task, but end the day asking, what did I even do? That's not freedom. That's fatigue dressed up as flexibility. Now compare that to a day with structure. You wake up. You take 5 minutes to breathe. You already know your first task because you decided it yesterday. No guesswork, no noise, just movement in the direction that matters. That's not rigidity, that's relief. Structure doesn't trap you, it frees you from indecision, distraction, and emotional clutter. Let me say this clearly, order is not about control. It's about creating containers, mental and emotional boundaries that protect what's sacred. Your attention, your time, your peace. Things like a morning routine, a weekly review, a no-phone rule after 8 p.m. A daily journal, even 10 minutes of stillness before sleep. These aren't rules. They're rescue lines in a world pulling you in 100 directions. So take a moment right now and ask yourself, what am I tolerating that drains me silently? Where have I let small disorder become daily weight? Is it the clutter in your home, the unread messages, the project you keep delaying because it scares you? Whatever it is, name it, because disorder doesn't just steal time. It erodes your clarity quietly, slowly, without protest. The Stoics didn't believe in controlling the world. They believed in controlling your orientation toward it, and that starts with order. Not rigid schedules, not perfection, but a system, a rhythm, a structure that brings your attention back to what actually matters. And from there, your power returns. So if you've been feeling scattered, foggy, or behind, it might not be about time. It might be about structure. And the good news, you don't have to fix everything overnight. You just need to start small, create a little space, a little rhythm, a little order. Because when you give your mind the structure it's been begging for, you stop reacting to life, and you start leading it. Let me tell you something that most people don't like to admit. Success can make you soft, and not in an obvious way. Not in a sleep all day or give up on life kind of way, but in a slower, sneakier way. It whispers, you've earned this. Take a break. You don't need to push so hard anymore. And just like that, your edge starts to fade. Look, I get it. You've been grinding, you've been showing up, you've made progress. And when the results come in, a raise, a transformation, a win, it feels good, and it should. But here's the danger: we confuse success with arrival. We think, I made it. So we let our foot off the gas. We sleep in a little longer. We skip the routine that got us here in the first place. And slowly, without even realizing it, we start living off yesterday's discipline. You know who understood this deeply? Marcus Aurelius. The man ruled the Roman Empire, one of the most powerful men in history. And yet every night he sat down and wrote, not for the world, not for applause, but to remind himself, don't get lazy, don't let comfort erode your character. He knew that power without presence becomes weakness. Because success doesn't end the journey, it tests it. It asks, are you still hungry? Are you still aligned? See, failure wakes us up, but comfort, it lulls us to sleep. And the moment you stop doing the things that built your success, you've already started slipping. Let's be clear, rest is not the enemy. We all need rest, but there's a difference between strategic rest and emotional surrender. One recharges you, the other drains you slowly without permission. Have you ever told yourself, I'll take a day off, just one? Then one becomes two, then a week. Then you can't remember the last time you felt sharp. Yeah, been there. So what if we flip the script? What if you use success not as a reason to pause, but as a reason to refine? You made it this far because of discipline, because of intention, because you cared. Now imagine what happens when you build on that foundation. When instead of drifting, you double down. Instead of asking, how can I coast? You ask, where can I sharpen? You don't train because you're behind anymore. You train because you're committed. Because excellence isn't an act, it's a lifestyle. And real growth doesn't come from chasing desperation. It comes from devotion. So if you're in a season where things feel good, great. Just don't fall asleep. Remember who you had to become to get here. And then ask, what's the next version of me asking for? Because the climb doesn't end when you reach the peak. It begins again. And this time you're not climbing from fear. You're climbing from clarity, from strength, from vision. Let's be honest. How many days have you waited for motivation to strike? How many mornings have you said, not today? I'm just not feeling it. You stare at the journal but don't write. You look at your workout clothes but never change. You plan the thing, dream about the thing, but never actually do the thing. Because somewhere along the way we were sold a lie that motivation comes first. But here's the truth. Motivation is not the spark, it's the smoke. We've been taught to wait. Wait until we feel ready. Wait until the mood is right. Wait until inspiration drops from the sky and lights a fire under us. But the Stoics knew better. They didn't live by feelings, they lived by principles. They didn't wake up asking, do I feel like being disciplined today? They acted based on what was right, not what was easy. Your mind is a master negotiator. It whispers things like, let's just start tomorrow. You're too tired today. 5 more minutes won't hurt. You need to be in the right mindset first. But none of that is truth. It's delay disguised as logic. Let me show you how real discipline works. Don't feel like working out, just put on your shoes, walk for 5 minutes. Struggling to write, open the doc, type one ugly sentence. Avoiding a task, set a timer for 10 minutes and start anyway. That first action, it's everything. It's not grand, it's not Instagram worthy, but it breaks the spell. You see, motion creates emotion. It doesn't go the other way around. The second you start, even badly, something changes. The fog lifts. Focus returns. You go from stuck to in motion. That's when motivation shows up, not before. This is the mistake most people make. They wait to feel powerful before they act powerfully. But the ones who rise, who create, lead, transform, they move before the feeling. They don't rely on mood. They trust momentum. They understand discipline begins at the start line, not the finish line. If you're waiting to feel ready, you'll wait forever, because ready is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort. You weren't born to live at the mercy of your moods. You were born to master them, so instead of asking, do I feel like it today? Ask, what would my future self thank me for doing right now? Start small, start ugly. Start tired, start messy, but start. Because once you're in motion, the energy follows, the discipline builds, and the version of you you've been waiting for. You meet them in the doing, not in the thinking. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. How much of your life have you actually chosen, not just followed, not repeated, but consciously, intentionally chosen? Because if you're like most people, including me at one point, your life might feel like it's being lived for you, not by you. You wake up, reach for your phone, scroll until your mind feels full but your heart feels empty. You go through your day responding to texts, emails, demands, not from clarity but from habit. And maybe you've never stopped to ask, is this truly mine, or did I just inherit it? That quote from Jung, it hits deep, because what we don't examine becomes what controls us. We think we're in charge, but really we're just repeating a script someone handed us years ago, a parent's voice, a societal rule, a belief we never chose but somehow carry like gospel. You want to know what real discipline is? It's not just grinding. It's not just showing up early or pushing harder. It's awareness. It's the willingness to pause, to ask, where did this belief come from? To question, why do I always say yes when I'm exhausted? To notice, why do I scroll every time I feel uncomfortable? Because discipline without self-awareness, that's just obedience. Let me give you a real-world shift. You've had a long day. Your hand reaches for your phone, default reaction. But then you catch yourself, and instead you close your eyes, breathe. You sit in the stillness you've been avoiding all day. That moment, that's discipline. Not because it's hard, but because it's chosen. Or maybe someone asks for your time again. And usually you say yes without thinking. But this time you pause, you check in with yourself, and you say, let me think about that. You just broke the pattern. You took your life off autopilot. That's what awareness does. Most of us aren't lazy. We're conditioned. Conditioned to please, to perform, to respond, to stay small, to follow rules that were never ours to begin with. And we call that discipline, but it's not. Real discipline doesn't ask what's expected of me. It asks what aligns with who I truly am becoming. Maybe you grew up believing achievement equals love, so now you overwork and call it drive. Maybe you were taught not to rock the boat, so now you avoid conflict and call it peace. But those aren't choices. They're inherited scripts, and the only way to rewrite them is with awareness. So here's the work. Every time you feel stuck, numb, resentful, pause, ask, is this really me? Who gave me this habit, this story, this role? And do I want to keep carrying it? When you ask those questions, something powerful happens. You begin to own your life again. Because discipline isn't just about action. It's about authorship. It's not just what you do, it's who's doing the choosing. And once you start living by conscious choice, not inherited reaction, you stop living someone else's life and start living yours. There's something powerful, sacred even about the moments when no one is watching. No expectations, no applause, no pressure to perform. Just you, your choices, and your future. Because here's a truth most people forget. Who you are in private determines who you are in public. We live in a world obsessed with visibility. We praise what's seen. We reward what's posted. We measure worth in likes, views, shares. But visibility isn't the same as integrity. Just because it's public doesn't mean it's powerful, and just because it's private doesn't mean it's small. In fact, the opposite is often true. Character, the kind that lasts, the kind that earns trust, the kind that leads, isn't built under the spotlight. It's forged in the quiet. In those small, invisible choices. Do you stretch when you said you would, even when you're tired? Do you stop scrolling when you know you've hit your limit? Do you keep the promise you whispered to yourself last night? These aren't minor decisions. They are the roots of your legacy. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, had access to more power than most people in history. And yet every night he wrote in his journal, not for public praise, not for followers, but for alignment, for honesty, for accountability. Because he knew, if you don't rule yourself in private, the world will eventually see who you really are, with or without your permission. Let's talk about self-trust. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it changes everything. When you consistently do what you say, even when no one knows, you walk differently. You speak with quiet authority. You carry yourself with presence, not because you're trying to impress, but because you don't need to pretend. That's a kind of power that can't be bought, taught, or faked. Self-trust is a superpower, but the reverse is also true. When you break your own word repeatedly, when you cut corners, avoid the hard things, betray your own values behind closed doors, it shows. Maybe not right away, but it lingers in your energy, your tone, your posture, your ability to stand tall when it matters most. Discipline isn't about public performance. It's about private alignment. It's about asking yourself daily, am I showing up for the person I said I wanted to become? Because the truth is, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your standards. And those standards, they're set in silence. So tonight, when it's quiet, when the noise fades, and it's just you and the mirror, ask yourself, did I keep my word? Did I honor the promises no one else even knew I made? Did I build trust with the only person who has to live with me forever, myself? Because in the end, the world will see what you privately practice. And when that moment comes, let them see a person who didn't just perform greatness, but became it. Let me ask you something real. When was the last time you sat down to focus, really focus, and didn't get distracted in the first 5 minutes? When was the last time you finished something and actually felt proud of it? In a world built to hijack your brain, this isn't a personal failure. It's biology being manipulated on purpose. Because right now, we're living in a dopamine-saturated environment. And if you don't understand it, you become a slave to it. Now listen, dopamine isn't the enemy. It's not some villain lurking in your brain. Dopamine is how we learn. It's how the brain says, hey, that felt good, do it again. The problem, the modern world figured that out and started feeding you cheap rewards. Scroll, ping, like, notification, pop up. You're not broken. You've just been trained to chase stimulation instead of satisfaction. Here's what no one tells you, not all rewards are equal. There's a massive difference between dopamine spikes and true satisfaction. One feels good in the moment, but fades fast. The other builds something deeper, something you carry with you. So if you want to reclaim your focus, your clarity, your self-respect, you have to rewire the reward. Let me show you how this works. Instead of chasing the thrill of starting something new, find the joy in finishing. Instead of novelty, value mastery. Instead of the instant high of being liked, crave the quiet pride of keeping your word to yourself. That's how you flip the script. Here are some simple, powerful shifts. Turn your phone off during meals, deep work, or personal time. Replace endless scrolling with intentional learning or reflection. End the day with a ritual, journal, stretch, or reflect instead of zoning out with a screen. These aren't rules. They are resets, little acts of rebellion in a world designed to keep you hooked. And here's the magic: when you start choosing deeper rewards over shallow ones, your brain adapts. It starts craving what actually strengthens you. You begin to associate pleasure not with escape, but with progress. And when that shift happens, discipline no longer feels like a chore. It starts to feel natural, because your mind is no longer working against you. It's working for you. This is what the Stoics were pointing to all along. They didn't eliminate pleasure. They just upgraded it. They chose the lasting over the loud, the meaningful over the easy. You can do the same. So ask yourself today, where has my mind been hijacked by cheap satisfaction? What would happen if I replaced those spikes with real results? Because your brain isn't broken. It's just waiting to be retrained. And once you tame the dopamine, you stop chasing noise, and you start building something real. Let me ask you a real question. Have you ever reached the end of a day and felt like you did everything and nothing at the same time? You were busy, no doubt. But were you aligned? Were you grounded? Or were you just reacting from the second you opened your eyes? If that sounds familiar, you're not lazy. You're probably unstructured. Here's what most people get wrong. Structure isn't cold. It's not robotic, rigid, or soul-crushing. Structure is a form of mercy. It's a loving container for your energy, a boundary that says, hey, I'm going to protect you from chaos today. Because without it, your mind spins, your attention scatters, your day becomes a blur of other people's priorities. Let's get practical. An unstructured day feels like whiplash. Everything is urgent. You're chasing, not choosing. You go to bed depleted without knowing where the energy went. But a structured morning, just 20-30 minutes of intentional flow, it creates momentum. It aligns your body, your brain, your soul. That small dose of order becomes a launch pad for creativity, focus, and presence. Structure doesn't box you in. It frees you from the invisible weight of decision fatigue. It's the reason some of the most creative, free-thinking people on earth, writers, designers, entrepreneurs, stick to routines, not because they're boring, but because they know freedom without form becomes chaos. And clarity, true clarity, needs space to grow. Structure creates that space. Here's the truth: you don't need a military schedule. You don't need to plan every second, but you do need anchors. A consistent wake-up time, a morning ritual that aligns you, a container for deep work, boundaries that protect your peace. This isn't discipline for the sake of discipline. It's mercy for your nervous system. Think about this. How many of your anxious thoughts come from lack of clarity? How often do you feel behind, not because the task is hard, but because you didn't know when or how to approach it? Structure solves that. It's a soft power. It doesn't shout, but it shields. It lets you stop fighting the current and start steering your ship. Structure is not a punishment. It's not about control, it's about care. It says, I value my energy. I respect my time. I don't want to live in reaction, I want to live in rhythm. And that rhythm, it starts with one simple question: what parts of my day could I anchor with love? Because when you build that container, your focus expands, your anxiety fades, and your life begins to move with more grace than grind. We often think change starts when we feel different. But the truth, change begins when we act different consistently. When we act in alignment with the person we want to become, not the person we currently feel like. And that one mindset shift, it rewires everything. You want to be a writer, writers write. Even when they're tired, even when it's bad. You want to be a leader. Leaders lead with intention, with presence, even when it's uncomfortable. You want to be more confident. Then you practice courage in the small things, speaking up, showing up, staying open, even when your hands are shaking. It's not about pretending, it's about practicing until what felt foreign starts to feel familiar. That's identity-based discipline. Let me be honest, becoming someone new, it's uncomfortable. It feels awkward at first. You'll question yourself. You'll wonder, am I faking this? But let me tell you, you're not faking it. You're training into it. The discomfort you feel, that's not imposter syndrome. That's growth. You don't wait to feel like that person. You act like them and the feelings eventually follow. It's like breaking in a new pair of shoes. At first, they don't fit right. But wear them long enough and they start to feel like they were made for you. So here's your question today. What would the future you do in this moment? What action, small, real, now, would align you closer to that version of yourself? Because every decision is a vote for the identity you're reinforcing or the identity you're rewriting. Your habits are how you cast that vote. Your routines are how you cast that vote. Your presence, especially in hard moments, is how you cast that vote. And over time, those votes become a life, a reputation, a self. You don't need to wait for motivation or perfection or someone to give you permission. You just need to start acting like the person you are becoming, not someday, today. Let me tell you something that changed how I live. You get exactly 440 minutes every single day. That's it, no more, no less, and each of those minutes, it's a brick you're using, whether you realize it or not, to build the temple of your life. The question is, are you building something beautiful or just stacking rubble? Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, people are frugal in guarding their money, yet waste the one thing it's right to be stingy with: time. We stress over bills, we guard our bank accounts, track every dollar, but time, we give it away freely, scroll here, check there, just 5 minutes. Until 5 becomes 50, until the day is gone. Let's do the math together. If you spend just 30 minutes a day scrolling through social media, that adds up to 11 full days a year. 11 days gone for what? Now flip that. Imagine spending those same 30 minutes writing every single day. You could finish a book in a year. That's the power of minutes. They compound, and they compound quietly. Every minute is a decision, a brick. And those bricks are either building something worthy of who you're becoming or slowly sealing you into a life you didn't choose. This isn't about hustle, it's about intentionality, about choosing presence over passivity, ritual over reaction, creation over consumption. Let me ask you, what would your life look like if you guarded time the way you guard your money? What would happen if you scheduled joy, focus, silence, just like meetings or errands? Because here's the truth. If you don't give your minutes a job, they'll be stolen by the world, by algorithms, by other people's agendas, by distractions that look harmless but slowly hollow out your day. You don't need to overhaul everything. Start small. Create a morning ritual. Protect 1 hour of deep work. Set boundaries for tech. Give space for reflection. Build your day with intention like an architect crafting something sacred. Because your life isn't built in breakthroughs, it's built in minutes. You don't need to be busy to be productive. You don't need to fill every moment. But you do need to own them, because the minutes you lose, they don't come back, but the ones you use well, they return tenfold in clarity, in creativity, in peace. So the next time you reach for your phone or feel like the day is slipping away, pause and ask yourself, what am I building with this minute? Because your life, your legacy, your freedom, they aren't built in years. They're built in minutes. Let me ask you something real. How do you know if you're actually growing? Not just staying busy, not just checking boxes, but really growing mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Because here's the truth, if you don't measure it, you're not growing, you're guessing. Imagine planting a tree but never checking the soil, never noticing if it's getting sunlight, never asking, is it stronger than it was last season? Would that tree thrive? Probably not. Growth without measurement is like sailing without a compass. You might be moving, but are you heading anywhere meaningful? Growth isn't accidental. It requires three things: tracking, reflection, accountability. This doesn't mean obsessing over numbers. It means getting honest about your patterns. Did I actually show up this week? Did I move closer to who I want to become? Where did I fall short and why? Even Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, took time every night to ask himself, what did I do well today? What could I have done better? Not to judge himself, but to align himself, to make sure his actions reflected his values. That kind of micro accountability, it compounds over time. Because when you start measuring what matters, you start spotting what's holding you back. Maybe it's the 20 minutes of mindless scrolling that turns into 2 hours. Maybe it's always breaking promises to yourself because no one's watching. Measurement brings it into the light, and what's brought into the light, it can finally be transformed. Tracking habits, reviewing goals, writing down your wins and failures, it's not about perfection, it's about clarity. And clarity is more powerful than motivation, because when you're clear, you stop spinning your wheels. You start making decisions that actually move the needle. You waste less time. You stop hiding behind the lie of trying. Growth isn't sexy most days. It's subtle, quiet, invisible to the outside world. But when you track it, you see it. You notice, hey, I don't procrastinate like I used to. I actually paused before reacting. I followed through 3 days in a row. That's growth, and that deserves recognition. So the question becomes, are you letting your progress slip through the cracks? Are you relying on vague feelings or concrete feedback? Because your future self, they're built on the bricks of today's habits, and you can't improve what you don't observe. Here's the invitation: don't just grow. Grow with awareness. Track what matters. Reflect often. Be accountable not to pressure but to purpose. Because if you don't measure it, you might just miss the fact that you're already becoming everything you hope to be. What if I told you discipline isn't a prison? It's not punishment, it's not suffering, and it's definitely not a chain around your neck. Discipline is freedom, but not the kind sold in slogans or vacation ads. I'm talking about the kind of freedom you feel when your mind is clear, when your body is strong, when your soul knows it's moving in the right direction. And that freedom, it's born through order. You build that freedom one brick at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of integrity at a time. Every time you show up when it's hard, every time you keep a promise to yourself, Every time you push through the noise and choose intention over impulse, you are whispering to your future self, I am becoming the person I was born to be. Not someday, now, because the myth that you need to feel ready before you start, it's just that, a myth. Readiness comes from alignment, and alignment comes from action, even small, quiet action. You don't master life by controlling it, because let's be honest, you can't control the chaos, the uncertainty, the curveballs. What you can master is how you move through it, with structure, with clarity, with presence. That's real power, that's earned peace. Even when no one's watching, even when no one claps, even when the results aren't immediate, keep building, keep laying bricks, keep moving forward with intention, because that's how freedom is forged. Not in bursts of motivation, but in quiet acts of devotion. So if you take nothing else from this journey, take this. Discipline is not about restriction, it's about creation. It's how you shape your life on purpose instead of by accident. It's how you build the inner temple, the quiet confidence, the unshakable strength that no one can take from you.